Sure.
Okay. So, um, now I was saying that it was a bit hard to kind of compose all my thoughts. It's another one of those moments when there's so much taking place in a small area of the country here that, it's somewhat of a challenge to really describe the full spectrum of it. There's so many influences on it, and it's such a dynamic situation. But for you, those of you that don't know me, I'm a registered nurse here in Minneapolis. I grew up in Chicago and have been a labor activist pretty much all of my adult life, and worked in various political campaigns, that sort of thing. Um, and this week I worked exclusively night shifts, so my the level of my rest and resources are a little strained at the moment. But regardless, I'll tell you a bit about what's happening in Minneapolis. I'm sure everybody has been watching it kind of unfold. Um, my family lives right in the center of the city, and just for some background, we're only 3/4 of a mile from the police station that was ransacked during the George Floyd uprising here. That police station is still uninhabited. The city is trying to make it into what they're calling a democracy center, which nobody really knows what that actually means. But it really means that they're just trying to uh, save face on this building that has sat there abandoned, and reminds everybody that what took place here 5 years ago when they killed George Floyd, and the Titanic uprisings that sparked throughout Minneapolis, but also throughout the United States. So um, everything that we're experiencing right now in Minneapolis is all within maybe 2 or 3 miles of where I live. So my kids go to school here. They both go to they go to two high schools. My son goes to a high school that was about 3/4 of a mile away from where Renee Good was shot by the ICE agent. I think that was on Wednesday. And on the same day, later in the day, the school of my daughter, which is also on the south side of Minneapolis, was raided by not ICE, but by Border Patrol, which plays an auxiliary role to ICE, and is pretty much directed by the same people regardless. In that case, they tackled a bunch of students. They abducted three people. Two of them were staff members of the hospital, or the school. They pepper sprayed a bunch of students, and a pretty notorious figure by the name of Greg Bavino was even there. This is the head of the Border Patrol. He is one of the central commanders, and when you see these offensives where they line up ICE, or they line up, these big offensives on the immigrant community in any city across the country, you're sure to find this guy. Well, apparently he was at the front drop-off place of my daughter's school when all the kids were getting out of the school on Wednesday. So um, it's really not much of a mystery to the people of Minneapolis why they have chosen to make this city really the tip of the spear of the major escalation of oppression, of intimidation of the immigrant community here. And yes, you can go so far as to say that ICE, which has been around for some time, 15, 20 years, is starting to feel a lot more like the SS, or the shock troops of whatever kind of proto-fascism we are experiencing here in the United States. So um, there is a very bad feeling. There is bad blood between the city of Minneapolis and the Trump administration. There has been since the George Floyd uprising. That never, the conviction of that officer, Derek Chauvin, 5 years ago, they view, and the loss of the third precinct and everything else that meant in terms of loss of control, has been sitting in the back of their minds for a very long time, and with an enormous amount of resentment. Um, I'm sure you guys are all watching the Trump administration. I mean, this takes place in the same week that they, grab Maduro out of Venezuela. So it's one of these things where the events are coming so fast, it's hard to keep up with them. Um, but the Trump administration is feeling extremely aggressive this year. I think Trump had made a bunch of statements about making 2026 a very decisive year for his administration, and really to really enact the policies that they've wanted to do for a long time, and get them visualized on the ground with a bunch of armed men who are all masked up and who don't carry identification, and who are literally grabbing people out of gas stations, department stores, schools, sometimes right out of traffic. Usually this is all soft targets in terms of, they're not walking into major groups of people. They're finding these individuals alone. Sometimes, a delivery driver, just the other day, a delivery driver was confronted with ICE and fled into the house of the woman she was delivering food to. And the poor woman in the house, I mean, this is just a mile from where I'm at right now, was sheltering this Latino woman who was in her house shaking and crying. So this is kind of the way they're operating right now. And they said that they have sent 2,000 agents to Minneapolis, which is the biggest immigration enforcement action in the history of the United States. So they've been preparing for this. They have wanted to, I think, make an example of Minneapolis based on everything that we've already discussed. Those 2,000 agents arrived here a couple weeks ago. They are certainly escalating their actions. It's almost impossible to know how many people they've actually abducted off of the streets. And then just in the last 48 hours, they also said that they were going to divert additional ICE agents from New Orleans up to Minneapolis. What is how I view that is that they're not having an easy time. It's not going unconfronted here. And so they have to reinforce their shock troops is what they are doing. They've had to abandon another major U.S. city to get additional reinforcements here to do that. So throughout the course of this week, they've really started to hit hard on picking people up. And more problematically for them, the response of the community has gotten a lot more solid and a lot more organized. And there's a general feeling of real defiance here in the face of this. It's very scary for a lot of folks here. I mean, most people in Minneapolis have never experienced anything like this. Most people in the United States have never experienced anything like this. And unless you're talking about the Black Panthers in the 1960s or something along those lines, to have anonymous governmental officials that are heavily armed in full body armor roll up on people and they're just gone. We don't know where they're at. We know where the detention centers are. We know they're keeping just horseshit records of people. And to see this playing out live on social media and all this is just, it's a very frightening thing to be confronted with, which is, of course, what this action has been designed to do, is to intimidate the population and to get them to roll over and make this far more normalized. I don't think it's going to stop in Minneapolis. I think that they are fully invested in this. But by and large, nobody here has ever seen anything like this, which, you could respond to that in a way of just avoidance, especially if you're white here, to retreat into your homes, just go to work, get you what you need to, get done. But it's so in your face that I think that the community was just compelled to respond. And so there's protests every day. There's protests all around the city, and in different areas. There's multiple protests. Interestingly enough, too, there are major groups and threads that have been developed on the app Signal, the encrypted app Signal, that are divided up by neighborhoods where you have. Like in my neighborhood, for example, the Signal thread that is organized around tailing the ICE agents, letting the community know where they're operating, running their license plates to figure out, where they're coming from in the United States, to confront them when they get out of their vehicles and they're accosting people. That my thread on just my neighborhood alone has 1,000 people on it. So, right now it's really that the neighborhoods have self-organized to follow these people around because we know where they're coming from. There's, major centers where they're being deployed out of, but of course, they're all in unmarked cars. So, it's a bit of cat and mouse to try to find these folks wherever they're going in the city. But 2,000 agents, by comparison, that's more than the police of Minneapolis and St. Paul combined. So it's a huge force for this city. We're between the two twin cities here, which are adjoining each other, we've got about 750,000 people. But between those types of actions and the resilience of the community and the I don't want to call defiance. It's it feels like a need to step up to these people and to get and confront them directly. That's the response that I don't think they were fully anticipating. I think that they felt that the city might be able to be intimidated off of the streets and to allow this action to take place, outside of live video footage and all this sort of thing. And they didn't get that. They've mobilized the community. And unfortunately for them, the community just did this 5 years ago during the George Floyd protests. So, it occurred to me at just a very minor rally. I mean, there was 10,000 people there yesterday at the rally. It occurred to me yesterday. I said, we're getting trained, that we are becoming better at responding to these people, which is, and it's happening very fast. I think that what happened last Wednesday with that officer was probably inevitable. I think it was going to take place in one form or another. But what really happened when Renee Good got shot and killed in South Minneapolis, that officer, he has been he's not, a lot of the recruits for ICE are coming from rural America. They're offering a $50,000 sign-on bonus. And, given the amount of economic despair in the United States right now and the pessimism people feel, that's a huge amount of money for people living in rural Minnesota or Iowa or wherever they might come from. So a lot of the recruits for ICE are very new people, and they're very unvetted, and they only have a total of 47 days of training. So they're very inexperienced. And, it reflects in the way they conduct themselves. These are not professional soldiers. They are not people that have dealt with big crowds of people challenging them and confronting them. And frankly, they're scared. They're nervous. They're jittery. And you can see this a lot of times when they're confronted by themselves by people, because, in those moments when they don't have the badge or they don't have the gun handy or they don't have, 20 armed people at their side, you can see it in their eyes. They're terrified. They don't know where they're at. They're not from Minneapolis predominantly. They're in a foreign city to them. They've been hyped up on a bunch of rhetoric and training from severe right-wingers who, are attempting to convince them that every immigrant in the entire United States is ready to go kill and rape people. And so that's a very volatile layer of this body, this group. But the officer that shot Renee Good has been on ICE for 10, 12, 15 years. He's a trainer. He's the one who is training ICE in firearms and all sorts of stuff. So this is a veteran that did that. This is not, originally everybody thought, well, yeah, here's one of these people that, came from outside of the city. They were given a gun and a bunch of body armor and a badge and instructed to go sick themselves on the immigrant population here. They got confronted, in this case, by a lesbian couple, and they felt emasculated. And the guy got freaked out and pulled the trigger. That's really not what happened. And you can see by all the videos that have been coming out, this guy likely intended to do this at some point. And when you watch the video, you can see that, you know, these women who are in one of these groups that are tailing several vehicles in ICE, and they even, I think she pulled kind of sideways on the road to slow or block traffic uh, with the ICE people, that the shooter originally gets out and takes out his cell phone and starts filming her. It's in his right hand. And, you know, it's her, and her wife and her dog had exited the vehicle. So he starts filming her. Another ICE agent is trying to reach in the door of the car to open the car door, which is locked, to pull this woman out of the car, which is, you know, I mean, in a normal, a textbook traffic stop, none of this stuff would happen. You know, these folks are operating very independently and very loosely. Well, basically, the officer was filming the car. He walks around the back of the car, at which point he gets confronted by the woman's wife, who gives him all kinds of business, you know, and is confrontational and not afraid, but also, you know, is insulting and relatively snarky to the guy. And when he comes around the passenger side of the vehicle, he changes the hand that he's holding his cell phone in from his right hand to his left hand. And then what he does is he walks around the front of the car, and within seconds, he has his firearm out. The woman is turning the vehicle, the wheel of the car, to avoid him and go down the street as she's being asked to do. He leans in and fires through the windshield. And then as she collapses and the car moves off, he fires 2 more shots through the passenger side window, shooting her 3 times. The car careens and finally hits a tree on the side of the street in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So the video is just everywhere. And, you know, now old reports from ICE are coming out that show that there was an entire period of like 7 or 8 years during 2008 to 2015 where ICE agents were shown to be intentionally walking out in front of vehicles so that they would be provided with justification for shooting people. And this is all took place in the years that this, and I forgot his name, Jonathan something or other, that he was originally in ICE. So it seems to be far more of a understood tactic when you want to shoot somebody, that this is how you get it accomplished, and you use probable cause or, you know, whatever you need legally to justify it. That seems much more likely what took place with the killing of Renee Good. Well, as you can imagine, the whole city went crazy at that point. You know, it crystallized everything that people had already thought about this organization of ICE. And then, you know, naturally, as soon as this takes place, you have the entire Trump administration taking to the air. I mean, Kristi Noem, who is the head of the Department of Homeland Security, I mean, the overseeing organization in Washington, she's running up and down these streets with getting photo ops in a fucking cowboy hat. I mean, you can compare these people to fascists, but they are not nearly as sophisticated and organized as, you know, the National Socialists were in 1933. These are a loose group of semi-capable people on their best days that are being directed by people like the Heritage Foundation and much more sharper people acting behind the scenes. But as you would expect, Trump came out. They called this woman a domestic terrorist, which is all part of the playbook as well, to criminalize political opposition at this point. You know, the same group of people have now said that, you know, it's beyond immigration as well now too. Anybody that they perceive as anti-Christian or anti-capitalist also falls under the description of domestic terrorists. So, you know, we've seen this before, and we know the playbook. They're executing it with a degree of sophistication, but sometimes with just total ineptitude. But what that basically did was catalyze the entire city. So now all of the protests have gone from a couple hundred people to thousands. You have people stepping up and confronting ICE, including people from the immigrant community that are most vulnerable. That a lot of times they're doing it most directly. And so that's really what kind of brings us to this moment. The local political apparatus is all a group of standard liberal Democrats. They've been compelled to say very tough sounding things, and accompany that by absolutely no action. So they're inert. They're not a capable body of people that are ready to confront this menace that's in our city right now in any real way. Plus, the local law enforcement, most of them are right wingers, and I would say a majority of them agree with the actions of ICE. And the entire organization of the police union here came out with a large statement that made no hesitation to say that they support ICE and they are entirely in favor of their role here in Minneapolis. So you don't have any governmental officials that are really stepping up to them in any significant way. They're placating them, and they're saying the things that they believe people want to hear. But in terms of defending the population, it's just not there at all. It's just upon the community. So, that's really kind of the situation we're in here right now. I mean, I could answer any questions that you guys like. This is, again, it's just a small part of a very large picture. This is going on nationally. It's gone on in cities across the country. It's gone on in Chicago and New York. And sometimes ICE is very successful, and a lot of times they're finding too much resistance in the communities and they have to regroup. So it's a severely dynamic point in time for us.
Yeah, thank you, Cliff. It's really good to get an on-the-spot report, and almost in sort of only days after the event that you're describing. Any comments? Have any points or questions? Matthew? No, Ian, sorry, first, then Matthew.
Ian indicated before me.
Thank you. When I thought this was just the planning meeting, but we had a comrade from Minnesota way back, I was going to suggest a lead off next week. So thank you for doing it now. An excellent one, very illuminating. Just a few quick questions. I saw on Channel 4 News a couple of nights ago, they were saying it's not yet reached the level of George Floyd protests. I don't know if that's pessimistic on their part, or if it's even perhaps due to the time of year. I know Minnesota can be as cold as Mars at this point in this calendar, and of course there isn't the COVID thing exacerbating it. But also the change in the right since George Floyd. They were making the point that Trump did pay lip service to what a terrible crime it was. We got to get justice for George. And now, 5 or 6 years later, immediately jumping on she's a domestic terrorist, it's her fault she got killed. So they really, the other side have really radicalized. Some of their more free-thinking elements, like Tucker Carlson, I saw, was himself pointing out, why have you not got at all of a human response to this? But certainly from Trump and Vance and all these other goons you mentioned, it's pretty explicit license to kill kind of thing. ICE can do whatever they like if they subjectively themselves feel under threat. So it really is becoming like an army of occupation in the States itself. I mean, earlier in the week, a webinar about Venezuela, somebody asked in the chat, could America be getting, and Trump specifically, overstretched? And they were meaning abroad. Venezuela, really crazy things like Greenland, as well as Iran and Cuba and Panama and all the rest of it. Now, I guess the question is, will he also be overstretched at home? Whatever his quote-unquote successes abroad, could this be the one that really comes back to bite him? Or at least undermines his imperial ambitions? Or otherwise, maybe he'll embolden further to try and get the pressure off in that way.
Should I just answer the questions as they come up, or should I hold off until?
It might be better to have two or three questions and then you come in. Is that all right?
Sure.
Finn? Sorry, Matthew.
Okay. All right. Thanks, comrade. Yeah, and thank you to Cliff for that introduction. Really very useful. I think. I mean, the thing is, the thing about this, of course, is the method of killing people is normal for cops in the US. I mean, the known kill rate for cops in the US is at least 1,200 a year, as recorded. I mean, obviously they don't do it officially, but recorded. And presumably that's a very serious undercount. And cops are licensed essentially to go around killing whoever they like. It's part of the system. I mean, the thing is, the result of the protest after these huge George Floyd protests around the whole country made zero difference to how the cops behaved at all. And in fact, of course, the thing is that all of the politicians essentially agree with that the cops should be able to kill people on a casual basis. Obviously not rich people, but people they come across on the street or mentally ill people or whoever else. That's a method, and it does make the US quite exceptional in that rate of killing people by cop is not known in any other imperialist country. It just doesn't happen. It's obviously part of the whole ecosystem of the actual political system that happens. And it's accepted by all the political operations. That I believe, I understand that actually, of course, that came up in the last election in Minneapolis for the mayoral election, and actually, of course, the effort to alter the nature of Minneapolis Police Department lost. They lost that election because that was one of the main questions on that election. That in fact, people weren't prepared to change MPD, and of course, MPD has come out and defended ICE. And turned up in force to defend ICE against the protests, as you might expect. The other thing, of course, is the racism. Racism, incredible. I mean, if you look, the Supreme Court's actually come out and said it's okay for ICE or anybody else to apprehend people on the basis that they're not speaking English on the street, or they're brown, or they have some other skin color other than white. And the importance of this case actually is the fact that Rene Good is white. They've actually killed people who are brown, but nobody gives a flying fuck. And that it's that as well. The method of the system in those terms, that it as you say, and it actually does. I mean, clearly, then associates exactly with imperialism abroad. That the two are intimately linked. Intimately linked. There's no difference in terms of a suppression internally to this crazy militarism abroad. The other thing I think input is about political. Is there any political move away from the Democrats, of course, who are part of the system and actually exist on the basis of this whole method of oppression and killing. And particularly, of course, obviously the Somali community, who are the principal target of the Trump administration, to say all Somalis are, should actually, deserving of either being thrown out of the country or killed. And of course, particularly Ilan Omar and so on, as another part of the suppression in Minneapolis and the targeting in Minneapolis. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Finn, then Jimmy.
I want to thank Cliff for that informative contribution. The issue of Minneapolis is fairly well covered in the media here, but what's missing entirely is any statement or any comments from public figures, and that's the question I'm asking Cliff. Has Mamdani said anything about the issue in public? Has Bernie Sanders spoken out about the issue in public? Has the Democratic Socialists of America issued a statement? Has any serious national figure spoken on the issue? Have the trade union movement, either locally or nationally, addressed the issue in any way? And also, there's an issue of which Matthew alluded to. If none of these people are speaking out, what do they actually represent at all? And I'm interested to hear any kind of a comment that might come from some of these so-called left-wing people. I noticed a member of Congress, Somalian woman whose name escapes me now. I haven't seen much publicity even about her. So the question really for Cliff is, has any of the figures I've mentioned, specifically Mamdani, spoken out against this killing?
Thanks. Jimmy?
Has referred to the question that I had in mind. It's in relation to the trade unions. First of all, I want to thank Cliff because comrades don't know he's had a hell of a work week and he's got up very early in the morning to be here with us. So I thank him on behalf of us all for his attendance. But the particular question I want to request is any movement, any discussion, any indication of any reaction by the trade union movement, either by comment or by attempt to mobilise or protest or whatever else.
Carell?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Cliff. That was really, really very interesting and absolutely terrifying because I've got family in Los Angeles and more importantly in Florida, where life is very, very difficult for anybody who is even liberal-minded and working there, let alone a socialist. So I think, that what happened in Minneapolis just a few days ago, it's not far from where George Floyd was murdered. And what they do to black people, now white people are understanding exactly what it is like to be black in America and feel the full racism of the state. My question to you is, it's thrilling to see in so many cities in America that level of resistance. It is eye-opening and it is very heartening. But what is the potential for a concerted political and actually a physical response to ICE and what Trump is doing with MAGA? They have to be fought. There is no other way. The Democrats are finished, aren't they, in the eyes of most people? But what is the potential for ordinary people to actually rise up and challenge the state and say, we are not going to accept this shit any longer and the system has to change? What is that? What is the potential for that?
Thank you. You've got a number of questions there, Cliff. But just before you do, I see we've got Jack here, another comrade from the USA. Would you like to add anything?
Well, I just came on a few minutes ago, and I certainly don't know a fraction of what Cliff does about what's going on there. I'll say a couple of things. In terms of the Democrats being finished, which the previous speaker just said, well, yes and no. That is, where's the alternative to the is there any party of the working class in Mass? No. Are the trade unions stepping out on this? Not nationally. I don't know what's going on. I really don't know what's going on in Minnesota, but not here. And I don't think nationally. I think Mamdani did make a statement. I think that the Somali congresswoman that I think Finn was asking about, that's Ilhan Omar, and I don't know whether she's making a lot of statements or what she's doing there. Cliff would probably know. I know that she did make a couple of statements that I saw in the media. But I think that from what I've seen here, there are sections of the people in the mainstream of DSA who are not the majority, but some now are really reconsidering their support for the Democrats, and I think there's a basis for a united front. A longtime collaborator of mine in the Oakland Teachers Union, who, like me, is now retired from there, but he's teaching adult school nearby in Richmond. formulated a motion which was passed by his union, which is a small union, but calling on the labor movement to condemn the state violence directed at Caracas and at Minneapolis, at Portland. He now teaches remotely from Oregon, and reported back to a few of us yesterday on the demonstrations in Portland, in which he said he was able to shame a number of the DSA people, into saying that they will organize, an independent and join with others in a block at future demonstrations, because they didn't yesterday. In any event, so I helped formulate that motion because he wrote to me before making it in terms of how to generalize motions that have already been passed by the Oakland Teachers Union against the violence against the basic invasion of Venezuela. And I think that there certainly is potential for there being a significant crack now in support for the Democrats in terms of a mass rejection. We'll see. I mean, the Democrats have held up for a very long time under situations like this because there's no alternative. Because people come back, it's necessary for trade unions to step out and take a leadership role. Is that going to happen? So far, there's no sign of it. So, so the motion from the adult teachers union, of course, is being taken to central labor councils in a couple of different counties here, and it may or may not pass there. But the question is, when they do pass, typically, and this has been my experience when I was on the Alameda Central Labor Council from Oakland, that they're rubber stamped, and then nothing is done. They pass a motion, they put it on the shelf. So can there be more? But I'm not going to speak any more about it because Cliff is there and doing an awful lot, and I don't want to try to say things that I don't know much about. But
okay, Jack, thank you. Cliff, you've got plenty to reply to, so
yeah, I'll just try to take them in order. It was Ian that was raising the question about the protests not necessarily reaching the level of the George Floyd protests, and in general, that's true here. That the numbers are not all out there like they were with George Floyd. So I guess this is the question. There's some different composition for these protests too. For one, it was a local law enforcement officer killing an individual, which has been pointed out as a routine occurrence in the United States. It's utterly predictable and totally common, and has been for years. And the main protests there's a couple different factors involved in it. The Black community here during George Floyd had reached its breaking point, and it snapped and pulled the whole city in with it. And it was a reaction that was so visceral that, entire blocks of the city, whole areas of the city were set on fire right away the first night. Helicopter. It was a massive, immediate response, I think, due to how graphic and how brutal that video was, and something that had been long coming. Whereas the significance right now with ICE, I believe it has something to do with the fact that this was a response to an organized political protest. And now you have the government killing protesters, which isn't necessarily in the realm of national acceptance. That's not common. I mean, it's certainly happened in the United States, but I think that maybe people perceive it differently. Whereas the other, the police of killing another, a black man, you could turn on the news any given week and find that. So this has a different element to it. I don't know. It could balloon up to like George Floyd. There are different protests, and there are different compositions, and different things sparked them. But the way the community is organizing and responding to it is certainly informed by the George Floyd protest. The element of racism within this is certainly carries over to all the actions of the ICE folks. And then also too is that you have this utterly provocative president who seems to be totally belligerent and clueless of any restraint in Washington that is antagonizing this, including all of his cabinet. So it feels here more like something that is building up, that it's a response that's building versus a massive rejection or reaction to something. I don't know how that will totally play out. You also raised a bit about the split in the right with Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is only one of these right-wing commentators that has broken with the Trump administration. You have Candace Owens, who is a commentator who used to be completely Team Trump and who is now openly saying that this guy is controlled by the state of Israel, that the attack on Venezuela was timed to coincide with when the administration was supposed to turn over the rest of the Epstein files. And a lot of these right-wingers have a sense of holy righteousness about them. And when they're pissed off, they turn that same kind of passion right now back on Trump. There's a couple more that are escaping my mind right now, but there seems to be the Marjorie Taylor Greene is another one, who is a politician here in the United States that has turned on Trump. So there is this kind of fracturing within the right. I don't know fully where it's going to go, but a lot of these actions by the Trump administration have crossed some line with these people, and they've offended them in some way that after the murder of Charlie Kirk earlier in the fall, which to some of us felt like the burning of the Reichstag. We thought, well, here it comes. They're going to write carte blanche at this point. They're fracturing, and I don't really know where those fractures are going to go. But for example, with Mamdani, he's an extremely polished individual and articulated and conscientious. Is still he's a social democrat. However, the polling said that 10% of the Trump people that voted for Trump in New York voted for Mamdani. And it's likely because he took a severe class perspective in his campaign, which was what Trump promised all of his voters, that he was going to reduce grocery prices, and all this kind of nonsense that, of course, he never fulfilled. So there's that element to it where, the Democrats can't fulfill that vacuum. They can't address the class politics. They can do so. They can make a statement and speak, but that's it. In terms of the connections between, imperialism abroad and how interlaced that is with the attitude of the government internally in the United States, it simply feels here like counterinsurgency. I mean, that's what that's where we're on the cusp of. I mean, we're watching that imperialism turned inward at this point. And I have no doubt that it's being informed by the counterinsurgency manuals of the United States military. There's also stories coming out about ICE being trained by the IDF, and connections, all kinds of connections with that. So, those things are fully interlaced. I think that's becoming revealed to the American public in more sharp terms. Any political movement away from the Dems, my short answer is no. That within the trade unions, and I'm in the Minnesota Nurses Association, The trade unions here, and I'm sure you've discussed it before, are really an appendage of the Democratic Party. The entire leadership of the trade unions, they're the puppets of the Democratic Party. When they're the mouthpieces when the Democratic Party wants to wrap itself in some kind of working class cloak. It phones the trade union leadership. It has them on speed dial, and the next thing you know, there's a social media campaign about whatever politician needs that kind of camouflage. So the problem with that is that the Democrats haven't produced shit for the American working class in so long that it's fractured the entire trade union movement to where a lot of the trade unionists, whole significant percentages of them voted for Trump. So it's a very confused situation that makes an enormous political vacuum right now here. And it's a vacuum that it's got nothing to crystallize around right now. So, you've got I think 40% of the United States is registered independent. They have no political party. Frankly, I think that the idea of a Labor Party is probably more powerful and with greater potential now than the formation of any political party in the United States dating back maybe 120 years, maybe longer. That's the level of vacuum that's happening within American politics, and it's just simply not being filled anywhere. I mean, we've taken resolutions to our unions and that sort of thing. I took a resolution to the Minnesota Nurses Association that said that we would never, moving forward, give any aid or support to either the Republicans or the Democratic parties. And just on first reading it, it almost passed. And nobody had even heard the resolution or even vetted the idea that we could even build any kind of alternative. To most working people, there is no alternative. And the Democrats and the Republicans have made such hurdles to the establishment of a new political party that it's almost like fantasy, the idea of it right now. Well, objectively, it's not. The trade unions have chapters in every single major city and across every state, nationally. The structure is all there. Under different circumstances and leadership, it could be something that would be formed overnight with billions of dollars of funds and union dues that are normally, hustled over to the Democratic Party that could be reappropriated. That's all just sitting there. But I don't know for sure if the American working class has the vision of it right now in terms of a possibility, even though the distaste for the Republicans and the Democrats, I mean, it keeps setting new lows. There are some people talking about the need for the Democrats to win the midterms to get this person in Washington somewhat neutralized by a new Congress. But the Democrats have absolutely nothing to offer people. All that they have to offer people right now is that they aren't Trump. They're not offering health care. They're not. I mean, it would be a simple matter of a 3-position platform for them to win in a landslide. I mean, even on the health care thing, it's like my senior citizen mother, after the CEO of United Health Group was assassinated in broad daylight in New York City. She said, Jesus, if Joe Biden were to bring a CEO of a health insurance company to the Oval Office and put a bullet right into his forehead, he'd win in a landslide. It united the entire nation for a moment. But the Democrats, they are not politically capable of doing that because they're just the arm of the same corporations that the Republicans are. So it's just a vacuum that seems to get deeper and deeper as conditions deteriorate here. The Somalis, there's a ton of Somalis in Minneapolis. Ilhan Omar is my representative here. I'm in her district, and the antagonism about the Somalis, I think, is a secondary consideration to the Trump administration underneath their intent to get at Minnesota and Minneapolis specifically. And I think that if it was another major immigrant group here, they would be highlighted. And, it could be the Hmong people or it could be the Latinos. In Minnesota, it's the Somalis that there's a decent population of people here. He associates them with Ilhan Omar, and then this whole story about the fraud with the COVID funds, which is actually, they had to dust it off. It's 5 years old. I think that the intent was to target Minnesota and Minneapolis specifically, and that the Somalis were a group that they could hang all of this on and to, use as a kind of a rally point around it. I don't know for sure if it goes any deeper than that. Coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, of course, you had just in the last week that Israel recognized Somaliland, which is a section of Somalia that has some degree of political desire for independence, and that Israel is the first nation in the whole world to recognize Somaliland, with the conjecture being that maybe they could just move the 1.5 million Palestinians over there. It also happens to be right across the sea from Yemen and strategically located. So you can speculate on that. In terms of statements of U.S. political figures around this, I feel like statements are like the number one export of the Democratic Party and the trade union leadership. They can concoct statements like a well-honed factory. They know what to say. Ian, I think I saw the Trump's Thanksgiving message on Twitter, but I'd have to remind myself because it's just like a nonstop stream of ideas and antagonisms that come from that guy. He's unhinged. I think he's got his own political party very worried about where they're at right now. Jacob Fry, who is the mayor of Minneapolis and who rallied to the police's side during the George Floyd uprising here, he got, he's really kind of a washed out, wimpy liberal. That's really who he is. He's propped up there by the Democratic Party, and he's very friendly to the real estate agency here in Minneapolis. So, he's just a pawn. But, he suddenly got very militant this week, and he went on and he said that the claims of this woman, trying to attack an ICE agent and him acting in self-defense, he called them bullshit. Which, for American political figures is, that's tantamount to a declaration of civil war. They don't talk like that. He said that ICE should get the fuck out of Minneapolis. He said those things. They resonated with a lot of people around the country, which is really funny because if you don't know who Jacob Fry is, and that's all you know him for, he could seem like a real tough guy here, and that he's really going to step up to it, but he's a facade, and that's it. No sooner had they said those things than people, of course, are demanding that charges get brought against this individual. Just like we did with Derek Chauvin, that the Hennepin County attorney said that although that they have jurisdiction in this case, in other words, they could bring charges against this individual legally, even, being a county versus, the federal government and his agency, that unfortunately, until the federal government cooperates with the county and provides all of the information that they have for their own internal investigation, we wouldn't make an effective criminal prosecution of this individual. And then went on to say that she believes that the federal government will treat the investigation that they're conducting fairly. So, which is complete and utter nonsense. Everyone knows that. The federal government is not going to convict the ICE agent. They're investigating themselves. But what they could do is they could charge this guy with murder and have him arrested right away. They could say, we're putting this guy on trial. We're going to bring him to a jury of people from Minneapolis. They will evaluate the case on the 14 videos and the 100 eyewitnesses that were sitting there watching this all go down, and they'll let the jury decide whether this guy should, be sentenced to life imprisonment or worse. So, but they won't do that. They're not going to do that. They're going to deflect and they're going to derail, and they have to defang the moment. So they'll get out statements. The trade union leaders here, I know the National Nurses Union put out a statement. They'll dot the I's and cross the T's, and they'll do what they need to do to at least give an appearance of caring about this stuff. But, there's no workplace actions being discussed. The trade union leadership here is so disenfranchised its members that the statements that it comes out, nobody reads them. If you talk to 90% of the workers in my hospital and you said, oh, hey, did you read the last email from the Minnesota Nurses Association? Most of them will say, no, I delete those. I don't even get bothered with it. So it's a leadership that, has all the resources of the dues money and the offices and the infrastructure, but it's so disconnected from the members. I don't even believe that this leadership would be capable of marshaling some real response. Nobody believes them. They don't trust them. And so that's another one of those areas that's contributing to this political vacuum. But there's statements. Mamdani, I think he made a statement about it. The Democratic Socialists will certainly make a statement about it, and they're organizing on the ground as well. But they have had a long-standing addiction to the Democratic Party and have found it very difficult, if not impossible, to rupture with them. So the Democratic Party loves that. They provide some left cover for the party. And that's where it is. So a lot of their people too, like Ocasio-Cortez, the mayor of Chicago, Kinema, what is her name? Sinema, the one from Arizona that totally flipped ranks and became a Republican. They've really discredited the DSA. So, since the Bernie Sanders campaigns, they've not found themselves in a commanding position. They're kind of on a bit of a decline ever since that. I'm sure Sanders will put out some obligatory statement as well. Let's say here, what's the potential of a political and physical response, which is Krell's question, which I thought was really, as we say, putting the rubber to the road here in the United States. I think the potential is enormous. And I think that because it would be one thing if it was a sudden, shocking event like George Floyd, happened, and the response to that, and the response of the state, and the response of the community. The difference between that and what we're experiencing right now is Trump he wants to establish a brand new organization of armed police that's almost a borderline paramilitary at this point, who can anonymously take anybody for any reason and they disappear. And that's a central part of what I believe Trump's administration values right now. And one of their main offenses is to push that onto the American people. So they're not going to back down. And I frankly don't think that they know how. I don't think that they have it within them to have any judgment about whether they can, here we can push forward here, but we have to kind of pull back a little bit. We're going too far. We're going to risk fracturing everything. They are going to double down on this. I think that they're all in. Which means that it's going to carry on over time, and I believe going to get far more harsh and worse, which gives all of the communities in the country the opportunity to respond in a much more, we have more time for it. And it's also not just a flash event like George Floyd. This is going on from city to city to city. So the communities are all taking lessons from this, and we're trying to organize our own mental response to it. It's hard to believe when you see all of these events. I mean, for one day we're, snatching Maduro out of Venezuela. The next day there's a woman getting shot in the face in a residential area in Minneapolis. And the next day, Trump is talking about invading Greenland, and it almost starts to position NATO versus the United States. So, this stuff is coming at such volume to us that I think we're having trouble getting our brains to formulate what that response would really be. But, one of the things that I considered, and I know that other peoples are considering it too, is that these groups, these community groups that are tailing ICE, that are following them, videotaping them, whistling, blasting the horns, drawing attention to them everywhere they go. If these groups took it upon themselves to start bringing guns, I think it would change the dynamic of the situation, and it would fracture the Democratic potential response into 1,000 pieces. Because when, these officers are getting out of their cars and pulling, Latino mothers out of their cars, they consider themselves invincible. They're convinced that Trump will pardon them if they get brought up on charges. So they're operating with a level of impunity or internalized impunity, perceived impunity, that even the officers in Minneapolis don't have. The guy that killed George Floyd is still in prison. And so at least those officers have to look over their shoulder a little bit. There might be some consequence to it, where these guys don't feel that way. If people start showing up with guns, and as you all know, we have plenty of them here in the United States, that would produce a completely different dynamic. They would have to look over their shoulder. They would have to be afraid to get out of the car when they're pulling that Latino mother out. If you're worried that there's, 5 armed people standing in front of you, and God knows how many people that are armed that you can't see when you get out of your ICE vehicle, that's a very different dynamic. That levels the playing field. You have to worry about your life at that point. Trump, of course, would double down. I believe he would federalize the National Guard, declare martial law, and come into Minneapolis in a severe way. And we don't fully know how that would play out. So, but in terms of the potential of a real response, I think it's all right there. I'm not usually accused of being overly optimistic about how things play out in the United States, but I'm telling you, right here in Minnesota, there's a lot of sad stories and a lot of pain and anger, but the feeling that you get when you go to the rallies is that the wind is starting to form at our back, that people are starting to feel their collective strength. It feels like we're on an upward swing of that, which is not something I've felt very often. Maybe in Standing Rock, but really not since the big protests against the World Trade Organization in Seattle in 1999. Did I feel that it's like, oh, fuck, we might be able to rock these people. And you can sense it in the spirit of people, just the mood of the protests. And I don't really know where that goes. I don't know how that plays out, but I'm fairly convinced that the Trump administration can't back down at this point. They have to continually push and oppress, which is going to inform all of that. I think that might be it. If I forgot anybody, just let me know. Again, I think that's probably the best 30,000 foot view of it I can give.
If that was fantastic. That was really, really good. You've given us a real insight into the dynamic of what's going on there. And of course, we'll return to this many times. Obviously, what's playing out in the USA at the moment is crucial to all of us. It affects the whole world, and there's no doubt that we'll be speaking about this many times over the next period, and we'll definitely invite you back, Cliff, for the insight you've given us. Thank you so much. Jack, do you want to make a point?
Yeah. Now, I missed Cliff's initial presentation, so he may have raised this already, but I want to thank him for those remarks just now, which I thought I learned a lot from. I'm sure everyone did, but I think that, and maybe this point was made, what we're seeing now really is ICE appears to be operating as a paramilitary force, essentially, and they're being perceived widely around the country as essentially an American version of the SS. And I believe that there is a basis for, I've been very reluctant to call, Trump and the Trump administration fascists, but I believe that there is a basis now, for calling for a united front resistance, a militant resistance against what essentially is, in practice, a version of the SS, and on the ground, how do you differentiate it from fascist response? So I think that there is a real basis for that, for that kind of response. In terms of the fracturing of the Trump MAGA coalition that Cliff mentioned, the fault lines have been there all along, and they're coming out now. And under pressure, they may come out further. But Trump's kind of like a container that's held them all together. He has no fixed values at all, except for his extreme narcissism and corruption and the plutocracy, enriching himself and to a lesser degree his family and friends. But he's managed to keep these disparate points of view in line. Kind of like a garbage bag, gives structure to garbage that's thrown into it of different kinds. I don't know how if that may be breaking up under pressure, but people like Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, and others, they have millions of listeners right now, and they've managed in the past to be able to criticize Trump. Carlson has, Bannon has at various points, Musk, and then there's a pulling back behind him. Now maybe now the events are gonna push this a lot further. You have a few even strong MAGA people in Congress, a very small number, like Josh Hawley from Missouri, a senator from Missouri, who's responsive to a base which is a rural base, which is really upset about the slashing of the social safety net, and there may be others like that. Trump has delivered on nothing. In terms of the trade unions and what to expect, just one very short note about the California Teachers Association, which is usually viewed as one of the more, quote unquote, progressive unions in this country. Back 22 years ago, had an initiative on Proposition 13. Proposition 13 has huge loopholes for state property taxes, which the corporations could drive through. They had an initiative which would have closed those loopholes. It was within a couple of months of their floating it. It had over 40% support, and they pulled it. They withdrew their support for it and shelved it. 5 years later, I was on state council of California Teachers Association, which had 800 members. And I was on the Financing Public Education Committee. And this was in about 2009 when there was the effects of the 2007-2009 near global meltdown. And there was a meeting of a couple of hundred people. It was the Financing Public Education Committee, the Political Initiative Committee, and the top staffers from the union came. And I was able to, at that meeting, get an up and back and corner them about why did you pull that initiative? Why did you remove it? And they said initially, well, because it only had 43% support. And I said, of course, that was within a month or two of you floating it. It was going to be 8 months until the election, until the vote on it. And you could have easily, campaigned and it probably would have passed. So why did you pull it? And after an up and back, they finally said, well, we were contacted by the Chamber of Commerce, and they said that if we continued with this, they would go after the agency shop. Agency shop is Deuce Chekhov. And they said, and that would be the end for us if they got rid of Deuce Chekhov. Well, that's an indication of how the union leadership looks at their support, from the base, so they wouldn't pay dues unless forced to. But two, and of course I came back and said, well, then you can never be for anything meaningful, because of course, you will always get that response from them. Now, that's an indication, I think, of the way in which the union leadership, functions all along. They are, just really not just an appendage of the Democratic Party. In many places, like out here, they form the local leadership of the Democratic Party, and so I think that the only way this is going to change is going to be, and maybe this is beginning now, and we'll follow through, for there to be a mass upsurge from below, and that powers it, and then you'll see a split in the, perhaps, with some of the union leadership peeling off to try to preserve their positions. But in any event, I think it's going to have to come from mass moving from below, not looking, above for them to lead, because we see how they operate. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Jack. Yeah, I mean, we're going to be returning to the question of the developing crisis in the USA many times, and I think we leave this part of the meeting now because we do have some. Unless Cliff, you want to make a quick response to what Jack said? Otherwise, yeah, carry on.
I mean, I don't have a major response to it. It's all, I mean, I think Jack covered it pretty well. And I think you guys get the sense here that, I mean, there's so many variables with this, and it's, I mean, we knew the empire was in decline, but we didn't know it was going to be so decisive about it. And the stuff going on with NATO and, Ukraine and Russia, and then the whole ostensible rearming of the European continent, I guess I want to say that it feels like madness over here, but that, so it's going to have connections ongoingly. I mean, there's an empire in decline, and that is going to break all kinds of static structures. So I appreciate it. And I'm thankful to be able to speak with you folks, and to kind of, if you have anything else that you'd want to ask me, please feel free to email me or anything like that, because you guys are also going to have a wider perspective than I might hear sitting right on the ground as well, that can inform what we're doing. So thanks to you all, and thanks for Jimmy to reach out to me as well.